My name is Leora, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my family was just a little complicated. You know, the kind of family that smiles big in photos, but leaves you invisible in real life. I spent most of my life trying not to upset anyone, trying to be the daughter who didn't ask for too much. But something happened. Something that made me stop apologizing for needing to be seen. And once that silence cracked, nothing was ever the same again. Please listen to the whole story, then tell me, did I do the right thing? Was walking away the only way to stay whole? I'm still figuring it out, and maybe your words will help me understand it all better. Drop a comment. I'm really listening. I still remember that morning, like it was folded in the rain. It was sometime in late October, one of those Eugene days where the sky just gives up and pours for hours, like it forgot how to stop. It had rained nonstop for 3 days straight, but that morning felt colder than usual. Not because of the weather, really. There was just something about walking across campus with a shoulder that throbbed with every breath, and no one beside me, that made it feel even colder. I didn't think much of the fall when it first happened. A curb, a little speed, a wet patch, and next thing I knew, I was skidding off my bike in front of the psychology building. I hit the ground hard. My right shoulder took the brunt of it, but I got up, brushed it off, and went to class like nothing happened. That was 3 days ago. But the ache didn't go away. It got sharper, deeper. The kind of pain that doesn't just sit in your body. It starts asking questions. So I walked to the student health clinic, dripping from the rain, heart pounding harder than my footsteps. I told them about the fall, and within minutes I was lying stiff on a cold exam table while the nurse pressed around my shoulder with clinical calm. The doctor came in, looked at my x-ray, then said, "You'll need an MRI to be sure, but based on your range of motion and the way you're flinching, there's a good chance you tore something, possibly the rotator cuff." I blinked. Like, torn? He nodded. "You'll likely need surgery. Without it, you could lose full use of your arm over time, especially if you want to keep your range of motion." It felt like all the air got vacuumed out of the room. He kept talking. Something about recovery time, about physical therapy, but my mind had already gone somewhere else. The cost. $10,000, maybe more, he said, and student insurance would cover barely half. I nodded like I understood, like I had options, but I didn't. I sat in the hallway after the appointment, staring at the rain sliding down the window. I should have called someone, a friend maybe, but it wasn't a friend I wanted. It was my mother. The part that still believed I mattered in her life needed to try. One more time. I hadn't asked her for anything since I was 11, when I wanted to be a ghost for Halloween, and she said white bed sheets were good enough. I never asked after that. But that morning, something in me hoped she'd surprise me. I waited until after lunch. She picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Mom," I said quietly. "What's going on?" she asked, distracted. I fell off my bike a few days ago. My shoulder's worse than I thought. Doctor says I need surgery pretty soon." Silence. "They think it'll cost around 10,000, I added, trying not to sound like I was begging. "Insurance won't cover all of it." She sighed. "You fell again?" "Honey, we've been stretched thin. You know that." "I just thought, maybe you and Dad." "We're behind on taxes. Your dad's swamped with some contract stuff. Can't this wait? Maybe just try physical therapy first?" "But the doctor said, I really can't talk right now. Let me know how it goes." And just like that, she hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. It was almost like I expected it. I walked back to my dorm with my shoulder on fire and my heart just quiet. I kept telling myself maybe she was right. Maybe things were bad financially. Maybe I was being dramatic. 3 days later, scrolling through Instagram on my lunch break, I saw it. A photo. My parents standing proudly next to a brand new Lexus SUV in shimmering silver. Big grins, new leather jackets, perfect lighting. The caption read, "Finally rewarding ourselves after the grind." I stared at it for a long time. Not because of the car. I didn't care about that. What got me was the timing, the ease, the celebration, while I was trying to figure out how to keep using my right arm. They weren't lying about the money. They just didn't think I was worth spending it on. That night, I didn't bother changing the bandage. It had soaked through by the time I laid down, dark red bleeding into the corner of my pillow. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the steady drip of rain outside my window. Eugene never ran out of rain, but I didn't feel the need to cry with it. After that phone call, something inside me just shut off. Not in a dramatic, storming out of the room way, more like a door closing quietly, locking from the inside. I didn't scream, didn't sob. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall like it owed me answers. I wasn't angry, not yet. Mostly, I was numb. It's strange how fast survival mode kicks in when you realize you're on your own. That night, I opened my laptop and started Googling every combination of words I could think of. College student shoulder surgery cost, Oregon Emergency Medical Grant, Western Cascadia University student aid. I filled out forms with stiff fingers, emailed the student health office, reached out to the emergency relief fund. I made a spreadsheet of costs, payment plans, deadlines. Then I emailed my doctor and asked when the earliest surgery date was if I could pay up front. All while my shoulder throbbed, like it wanted to remind me it still had a say in things. I knew $10,000 wasn't just going to fall into my lap, so I did what students do best. I hustled. I picked up a second shift at Moss and Moonlight, the little cafe near campus, and signed up for late-night shelving duty at the university library. The library job didn't pay much, but it came with quiet, and quiet, I'd come to learn, was priceless. It was during one of those late shifts, maybe my third or fourth, when I first met Harper. She was already behind the front desk when I walked in, sipping from a dented thermos and flipping through a thick, worn paperback. She looked up, smiled, and nodded. Not the forced kind of smile people give when they feel obligated, but the sort that says, "I see you," without needing anything in return. We didn't talk much that night. She pointed out where the returned carts went, showed me how to log hours, and offered to split the vending machine trail mix if I got hungry. That was it. Over the next week, I found myself looking forward to those quiet shifts. Not because they were easy, they weren't. My arm ached, my eyes burned, and I was constantly doing mental math about bills. But because Harper was there, steady as a heartbeat. She never pried. She didn't ask why I was suddenly working 2 jobs, or why I winced every time I reached too high. But one night, when I moved too fast and dropped a whole stack of sociology journals, she crouched down beside me and said, "You okay?" "Yeah," I muttered, gathering papers with one arm. "Just sore." She looked at me for a beat too long, then asked, "Should you be lifting with that shoulder?" I hesitated. "Doctor says it's torn, needs surgery." She didn't flinch, just handed me the last folder and said, "So, when are you going in?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, trying to figure out how to pay for it. Another pause. Then she said something that stayed with me long after the night ended. "If you were a stranger on the street and told me that, I'd probably give you my whole paycheck to help. So why aren't your parents doing the same?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat tightened in a way I hadn't expected. No one had said it out loud like that before. I'd spent so long defending their silence, brushing it off as practicality, as stress, as tough love. But the question hung there, real and unshakable. I shrugged, which made me wince. She caught it, but didn't say anything, just pulled her sweater sleeves over her hands and leaned back against the desk. "My foster mom used to say," she added softly, "some people love you in ways that only make sense to them. Doesn't mean it feels like love on your end." I swallowed. "I don't think they even realize how much it hurts." "Maybe not," she said, "but maybe they don't care enough to learn." The words didn't sting. They settled, like truth finally finding a chair to sit in. We didn't talk about it again that night. We filed books, drank cheap cocoa, and complained about the campus printer being down again. But something shifted. It wasn't that Harper made the pain go away. She didn't offer to pay for my surgery or fix my parents or tell me I was brave. What she did was far quieter and somehow far louder. She made me feel seen. I walked home with my head a little higher, not because I had a solution, but because I had something else, a mirror. And what I saw in it was a girl who had spent years confusing endurance with love. It was a Tuesday morning when my phone rang. I was walking back from class, my arm tucked tight into the sling the nurse insisted I wear. The screen lit up with my mother's name. For half a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd called to check on me. She didn't even say hello. "Did you send over your income statements yet?" she asked, sharp like she was late for something. "I need them to finish the paperwork for the trust loan." I stopped walking. "What trust loan?" There was a pause. Barely a beat, but enough to sting. "For the credit union," she said. Like that answered everything. "We're moving some things around through the account from Grandma and Grandpa. But I need your student financials to complete the application." I didn't know what to say. I leaned against a damp metal bike rack and stared out over the lawn, wet and quiet under a gray sky. "You're using my information?" I finally asked. "We always have," she said, impatient now. "It's not like it's new. Just forward me your W-2s and the 1098T when you get a chance." Then she hung up. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear long after the call ended, listening to the silence. That kind of silence didn't just fill your ears. It got under your skin. Later that night, I remembered the first time she used my name for something. I was 16. I'd just gotten my learner's permit and was barely trusted to drive myself to school. Yet somehow there was a credit card in my name that I never applied for. I found the statement in a pile of mail she left on the counter. At the time, I thought it was a mistake. When I asked her, she waved it off. "It's just for emergencies," she'd said. "It helps build your credit." The bill included a spa charge, 3 online orders, and a hotel reservation in Bend. I told myself maybe it was easier this way. Maybe it really was for me in the long run. But it never stopped. Any time I brought it up, she'd snap. "Don't you trust us? We raised you. You think we'd hurt your future?" My dad always played the good cop. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "Your mom's just trying to keep everything afloat." But he never stopped her, not once. I didn't think about those moments often. I learned to file them away, like receipts you know you'll never return anything with. But that phone call cracked something, and what came spilling out was a mess I couldn't ignore anymore. That week, I submitted my application for a final year grant. It was a small scholarship offered through the psychology department. Nothing huge, but enough to help cover the rest of my living expenses. I filled out every line carefully, attached the required tax documents, and sent it off with a quiet, foolish hope. A few days later, I got an email from the department office. "Your application has been denied due to misreported financial assets." I read it 3 times before it sank in. Attached was a screenshot from the FAFSA system. It showed a listed asset, a trust account in my name worth over $30,000. I sat there, in the quiet back corner of the library, staring at that number. I'd never seen that account, never touched it, never even knew it existed. I forwarded the email to myself, then pulled up a search bar and typed, "How to find out who manages your trust fund." My fingers were shaking. I looked up and saw my reflection in the dark library window. Pale, tired, older than I felt the right to be. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. But something settled. Like when you finally understand that the ache in your body isn't going away on its own, that it's not just stress or bad sleep. It's real. And it needs to be treated. I opened a new browser tab and started looking for attorneys in Lane County who specialized in family trust disputes. I didn't know where this would go. I didn't even know what I was allowed to ask for. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep pretending they were just a little careless. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a choice, a pattern. One that had started when I was too young to fight back, and had continued because I'd been too afraid to push back. I closed the browser and opened Instagram, almost on instinct. Their post was still there. The Lexus, the leather jackets, the big smiles. I looked at it differently this time. It wasn't the celebration that got to me. It was how proud they looked, like they hadn't stolen anything, like I wasn't even missing. The snow came early that year. Not heavy, just a dusting over rooftops and bike racks, enough to soften the sound of everything. Even the air felt slower, like the whole town had agreed to move through December with a kind of hush. It matched how I felt, quieted, hollowed out, but still moving. I told Harper about the trust fund, about the scholarship denial, about the silence that had followed since. She didn't gasp or say, "Oh my God!" She just sat beside me at the circulation desk, sipping her thermos of peppermint tea. "I might know someone," she said after a while. "There's a student fund, not the usual financial aid stuff. It's more for students who've had to deal with complicated families. It's small, but they helped me once." "Helped how?" I asked. "They helped me file emancipation paperwork when I was 19, gave me legal advice, paid my first term's housing when my foster parents ghosted me. No questions, no guilt." I stared at her, unsure whether to feel hope or shame. She must have seen it on my face. "They won't fix your family," she added gently, "but they'll help you stop paying for their mistakes." A few days later, I sat across from a woman named Rachel in a small office tucked behind the campus legal aid center. She looked barely older than me, but her eyes were sharp and soft all at once. I told her everything, stumbling a little at first, then more steadily as the words came faster, heavier. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "You have the right to remove them from all financial and medical authority over you. We can help you do that." I blinked. "Even if they're still technically supporting me?" "They're not," she said. "They're using your name to support themselves." I went home with a manila folder full of documents I didn't know how to feel about. I read them twice that night, sitting cross-legged on the floor of my dorm, highlighter in one hand, ice pack on my shoulder. Somewhere around page 6, I realized what this meant. If I signed and submitted everything, I'd be cutting the cord for good. No more pretending we'd have a heart-to-heart over Thanksgiving dinner. No more hoping they'd remember my birthday or call to ask how the surgery went. This wasn't just legal, it was final. I waited a week before making the call. My dad picked up on the second ring. "Hey, kiddo," he said, too casually. "Hey," I said. My mouth was dry. "I wanted to talk to you about the trust and the scholarship I lost." He hesitated. "Your mom's handling that. She said you're overreacting." I swallowed. "I'm not. I didn't even know about the account. I wasn't told. And it cost me something I worked hard for." Silence. "I just think," I continued, "if you're going to manage my finances, I deserve to be part of the conversation." There was a sigh on the other end. "It's complicated. We've done a lot for you, you know. Not everything has to be a confrontation." "I'm not trying to fight," I said. "I'm trying to have agency." "I can't do this right now," he said. "Talk to your mother." The line went dead. A few hours later, a text from her lit up my phone. "If you're going to make this a legal thing, don't bother calling us family anymore." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. My thumb hovered, then fell away. I didn't reply. That night, I told Harper everything. We sat on the back steps of the library, wrapped in mismatched coats and cold air. She didn't say anything for a while, just looked up at the sky, where the clouds were starting to break, thin streaks of silver moonlight peeking through. Then she reached out and pulled me in, slow and steady, like she knew I needed to be held without asking for it. We sat like that for a long time. No words, no advice. Just warmth where there'd been cold for too long. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked a little. I don't need them to say sorry," I whispered. "I just need them to stop thinking they get to decide who I am." She nodded into my hair. "They won't change, but you already have." And I believed that was enough. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, tucked between a Canvas reminder about a group project and a campus bookstore promo I never opened. The subject line read, "Legal status update. Requested petition approved." Just like that. No fanfare. No exclamation mark. I clicked before I could second guess it. The language was sterile, almost cold. Your petition has been reviewed and approved. Effective immediately. Full financial and medical autonomy has been granted. Guardianship authorization removed. That was it. A few sentences to summarize the unraveling of something that had defined my entire life. I sat there in the library, surrounded by the muffled sounds of pages flipping and keyboards clacking. But all I could hear was the quiet hum of that one sentence replaying in my head. "You're free now." My name appeared at the top of the letterhead. Just mine. Not followed by, "on behalf of," not connected to a parent's address or signature. Just me? For a second, I felt like I was looking at someone else's life. Then came the guilt. Not a sharp, stabbing guilt, but a dull, familiar one, like the ache of an old bruise. It was the same feeling I used to get when I asked for anything more than I was told I deserved. When I got an A, and my mom said, "Well, it's not like you had a job or anything." When I brought up the credit card debt in my name, and Dad said, "We're just trying to help you build credit, sweetheart." Now I was building something else. A wall between their choices and my identity. And even though I knew it was necessary, I couldn't shake the voice in my head, whispering that I'd betrayed someone. To ground myself, I pulled the old photo album from under my bed later that night. I hadn't opened it in years, probably not since freshman orientation, when I was still trying to believe that the life I came from was just strict, not broken. There were the usual snapshots: birthdays, holidays, forced smiles at PTA events. One picture showed me at 6, missing a front tooth, holding a glittery "Welcome Home Daddy" sign. Another had us on a porch swing during a rare vacation, all three of us frozen in a too-perfect pose. And then prom. Me in a second-hand gown, my mother beside me in a dress that looked like it cost more than our grocery budget. I used to think those moments were proof that things weren't so bad, that every family had its messes. But looking now, all I could see was how hard I was trying to make it look okay. I closed the album and pushed it deep into my closet. The next day, I met with Rachel again. Her office was small but warm, with string lights along the windowsill and tea that always tasted faintly of ginger. We reviewed the next steps together, filing for full access to the trust, preparing supporting documents, and if necessary, launching a civil claim for misappropriation of funds. "If we can show that they used the trust without your knowledge," she said, "especially for personal purchases like the car, the court can order them to repay you. It could even escalate to penalties." I swallowed. What if they fight it? "Then we fight back," she said simply. She asked if I was ready. I nodded. Not because I felt fearless, but because I finally felt done making excuses for people who saw my future as an extension of their convenience. Back in my room, I opened a blank page in my journal, the same one I hadn't touched in months. The pages were stiff, like they'd forgotten what it felt like to hold my truths. I wrote slowly, letting the words rise without judgment. I don't hate them. Hating them would give them too much power. But I can't keep letting them name me. I'm not an extension of their tax file. I'm not the fallback account when they want something they can't afford. I'm not ungrateful for asking to exist outside their version of family. I'm Leora, and I get to define what that means, with or without them. I folded the journal closed and tucked it under my pillow, not for safety, but for quiet, like marking the end of a chapter that had been writing itself without my permission. Outside, the wind scraped against the windows. It had rained earlier, and the streets still glistened like fresh ink. I didn't turn on music or call anyone. I just sat there, listening, and in that stillness, I realized this was what it felt like to belong to myself. I wrote the letter by hand. No drafts, no typing, no delete key, just pen on paper, like I wanted them to feel every word. It wasn't about rage anymore. I wasn't angry. I was just done. The kind of done that sinks into your bones and makes silence feel louder than any argument ever could. I stacked the documents neatly. Termination of guardianship, a scanned copy of my paid surgical invoice with its bright red stamp across the top, and a summary of the legal filings regarding the trust. All of it real, official, irreversible. I clipped them together and slipped them behind the letter. One page, black ink. Nothing fancy, just the truth. I wrote, "This is not revenge. This is not punishment. This is the only way I know how to reclaim the parts of me I lost while trying to understand you, while hoping you might someday try to understand me. You raised me with rules, with expectations, and with the belief that family meant obedience, no matter how it felt. But loyalty without respect is just quiet imprisonment, and I can't live like that anymore. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for space, to heal, to grow, to breathe without needing to explain why. Goodbye, Leora." I sealed the papers into a padded envelope, wrote the return address slowly, as if writing it too fast might make it feel less real. I walked it to the mailbox outside the campus bookstore, where students were laughing over overpriced coffee and midterm stress. I slid the envelope through the drop slot and stood there for a moment. I didn't feel lighter, like in the movies. I felt quiet, like walking through snow that hadn't been stepped on yet. The next morning, I was shelving returns in the psychology section when my phone rang. I didn't have to look. I knew it was her. I let it buzz twice before I picked up. She didn't wait. "Are you serious, Leora?" Her voice cut through the phone like it always had, sharp, clipped, with a tone that made you feel like you'd already disappointed her. "You think this is how you fix things?" she said. "By dragging your family into court? By threatening your own parents?" I stayed still, one hand resting on a shelf of worn textbooks. "I'm not threatening you." "Then what would you call it? You're trying to destroy everything we've built." "No," I said, my voice calm. "This is the first time I've stopped pretending everything's okay." There was a beat of silence. Then her voice dropped into something colder. "You're breaking this family." "I'm not breaking it," I said. "I'm just done being silent so it can stay broken." I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. She was about to say something she'd probably repeat to herself for years. But I didn't give her the chance. I hung up first. It was the first time in my life I'd ended a call with her on my own terms. I stood there between the social work and gender studies shelves, phone still warm in my hand, and just breathed. Not out of relief or victory, but out of something deeper. A knowing. I had finally chosen me. 3 days passed. Then came the text from my dad. "I'm sorry it had to come to this. I wish things were different, but you've made your choice." No love, Dad. No mention of calling. Just a message that read like a resignation letter. I didn't answer. That afternoon, I scanned every document, signed, dated, notarized, and sent them to Rachel. She replied less than an hour later. "You did the hard part. Now we take care of the rest." It was the kind of reply that sounded simple on the surface, but held everything I needed. Acknowledgement, support, direction. Later that evening, Harper showed up at my dorm with her car keys and a smile. "You need a break from this air," she said. "Let's go somewhere that doesn't smell like old microwaves and financial anxiety." She drove us to Moss and Moonlight, the little cafe where we first worked together. I hadn't been back since everything started unraveling. Inside, the lights were low, the windows foggy from steam and conversation. It was warm, not just in temperature, but in feeling. We didn't say much. She ordered for both of us, then slid my drink across the table. "Try it," she said. I took a sip. Cinnamon, oat milk, a little nutmeg. Everything balanced and gentle. Comfort in a cup. I looked up and smiled. "For the first time," I said, "this doesn't taste bitter." She raised her mug, touched it lightly to mine, and said, "That's what freedom tastes like." Monday mornings always carry a certain weight, but that one felt different. The sky over Eugene was a soft, dull gray, the kind that made the air smell like wet concrete and last night's coffee grounds. I stood in line at the Woodridge post office, holding the padded envelope like it contained something fragile. It didn't weigh much, but it felt heavier than anything I'd ever mailed before. Inside were all the pieces of this strange, quiet war: the notarized termination of guardianship, the invoice for my shoulder surgery stamped paid in full, the rejection email from the scholarship committee citing the unreported trust, and the legal documents outlining the misuse of that very trust. And resting on top, the letter, the one I'd rewritten 3 times. Handwritten, no salutation, no dramatic flourish, just a single page folded neatly, sealed in a plain white envelope without a return name. Only the address, theirs. When it was finally my turn, the woman behind the counter asked, without looking up, "Priority or certified?" "Certified," I said, keeping my voice steady. "With delivery confirmation." She nodded, slid the barcode sticker across the envelope, and passed me a pen for my signature. I watched as she placed it gently into a bin filled with holiday returns and tax forms. Mine didn't belong in there. It wasn't a package. It was a line being drawn. A quiet declaration in padded craft paper. I walked out into the cool morning air, tucking my hands into my sleeves. I didn't feel empowered, or relieved, or brave. I just felt like I'd done the right thing. Maybe not the kind thing, certainly not the easy thing, but the right thing. For days afterward, I checked my inbox the way people check wounds, bracing without looking too long. Nothing came. Until day 7. Rachel forwarded me a message from their attorney, a flat acknowledgement that the documents had been received. That legal review of the trust was underway, that all future communication would happen through counsel. No apology, no disbelief, no, "Why would you do this?" Just acknowledgement, just paperwork. I stared at the screen, heart weirdly still. That was the moment I realized. Maybe they'd never expected me to leave, not really. They had banked on my silence for so long that the idea of me walking away wasn't even on their radar. And now that I had, there was only the shape I used to fill. That night, I didn't go out. I didn't call Harper. I didn't even light a candle like I normally would when I needed comfort. I just sat by the window of my apartment, wrapped in a thick hoodie, watching the slow, half-hearted drizzle. The rooftop across from mine had a small, crooked vent cap that spun lazily in the breeze, clicking every time it caught the right angle. I used to find the sound irritating, but that night it kept me company. My desk was cluttered again. A stack of printed documents, legal pads with scribbled notes, scanned emails, and receipts. Sitting in the middle of it all was the white envelope, the original, unsigned one I had kept as a kind of placeholder. A reminder that this all began because I finally said, enough. I thought I might cry, or shake, or feel small, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself whispering something into the room, not because I wanted to hear it aloud, but because I needed to believe it. "Not every door that closes is a loss," I said quietly to the window, my breath fogging the glass. "Some just keep the draft out." And maybe that's all this had ever been. Not a dramatic finale, not a war one, just a door closing softly behind me. A boundary that didn't slam shut but clicked into place, sealing out the cold that had been seeping in for too many years. I leaned my forehead against the cool pane and let the silence sit. Not the kind of silence that bruises, the kind that settles, the kind that holds. Outside, the rain picked up. Not a storm, just steady, soft, like it knew how to stay without drowning anything. And inside, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to be fixed. I had sent what needed to be said. I had chosen a side, and for once, it was mine. The final email came on a quiet Thursday morning, right before my early class on trauma psychology. I was sipping bad cafeteria coffee and scrolling absent-mindedly through notifications when I saw the subject line, "Case update, action completed." I opened it calmly. No racing pulse, No breath held tight in my chest. I didn't need to brace for anything anymore. The email was direct. My parents had signed the documents. They had formally relinquished all legal authority, financial, medical, everything. The trust account was now solely under my name. There was no message, no explanation, not even a single sentence of acknowledgement. Just a scanned form with one word at the bottom. Consented. I read that word over and over again, not because I didn't believe it, but because it felt surreal in its simplicity. There was no apology, no fight, no final attempt to guilt me into silence. Just a quiet ending, the kind you never think will come until it's already behind you. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. What I felt was a strange stillness, like I'd stepped out of a room I hadn't realized was suffocating me, like removing a coat that had been soaked through for years. The cold so familiar, you stop noticing it until it's gone. A few days later, Harper forwarded me a screenshot from someone in her circle. It was from my mother's Instagram, which had suddenly gone private. The photo of the Lexus had disappeared. So had the caption. Her entire feed had been scrubbed clean of anything remotely related to what had happened. I heard through a distant cousin that the car had been sold. Quietly. The explanation passed around the family was something about downsizing and financial strategy. No one mentioned the legal case. No one asked how I was. And strangely, that didn't hurt. There was no public reckoning, no dramatic fallout, just absence, the kind that used to terrify me when I was little. But now, it felt like peace. By the time spring arrived in Eugene, my shoulder had healed almost completely. I could lift my arm over my head without flinching. I didn't think twice when tying my hair up or reaching for a book on the top shelf. At my follow-up appointment, the surgeon smiled and said, "You'll be back to full strength by summer. Just don't rush it." I nodded. I'm in no hurry to go back to where I was. Back on campus, things started to feel open again. I wasn't walking around waiting for the next invisible punch to land. I wasn't checking my phone for missed calls from people who only remembered I existed when they needed something signed. One afternoon, after a seminar, my thesis advisor stopped me in the hallway. "You've got something real here," he said, flipping through my notes. "You ever think about grad school? Maybe clinical research?" I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. The future no longer felt like something I needed to ask permission to enter. A few weeks later, Harper invited me to Moss and Moonlight, under the guise of catching up. I hadn't been back since that cold winter evening, when everything was still tangled. The cafe looked different in the spring light, warmer, softer, almost like it had exhaled with me. We sat at a small table in the corner. No fanfare, no speeches, just 2 mugs of hot cider and a small card, slid across the table like it wasn't meant to change my life. On the front, written in Harper's soft, slanted handwriting, were the words, "You don't have to prove you deserve love to be part of this family." I didn't cry, but something inside me settled, like a knot loosening that I didn't even know was there. "Thank you," I said, voice low, "for giving me a home before I even realized I needed one." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Nothing needed to be explained. Some things just are. That night, I returned to my apartment and opened my journal. I hadn't written in it for weeks, maybe longer. But now the words came easy. I used to think forgiveness was the price of freedom. But I've learned freedom comes when you stop waiting for people to become who you hoped they'd be, and start becoming that for yourself instead. I'm not the quiet girl in the corner anymore. I'm not the echo of someone else's comfort. I'm the narrator now, and I choose peace, not permission. Later that night, the rain returned, gentle, steady, like it had known it would be welcomed back. I didn't grab my coat, or an umbrella. I stepped out in socks and a sweater, let the air touch my skin, let the rain find my face, and I whispered into the dusk, "I'm not afraid of getting wet anymore." Sometimes the hardest thing isn't letting go. It's accepting that some people will never meet you where you are. And that's okay. We're allowed to choose peace, even if it means choosing distance. If you've ever found yourself shrinking to stay in someone's version of love, maybe you'll understand why I had to stop. Have you ever been there? Standing at the edge of something that used to feel like home, wondering if leaving it behind means losing yourself, or finally finding who you've always been. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it spoke to something in you, I hope you'll join me again next time. Until then, be gentle with your heart. You deserve that much.